Amid the fire and fury of modern-day presidential politics, it's almost shocking to see that a Republican and Democrat can still be relatively nice to each other. Midwestern nice, that is. Tuesday's vice presidential debate surprised a lot of onlookers, not because of any new policy revelations, but because candidates Tim Walz of Minnesota and J.D. Vance of Ohio appeared to agree almost as much as they disagreed.
You're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good.
Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this.
Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue.
I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things.
Phew, because I thought the country was more divided than ever and on the brink of civil war, as some provocateurs like to provoke us into believing. But Tuesday's debate felt like debates of yore, the kind we used to witness before 2016, when candidates offered pretty rote policy positions and canned zingers. Up until the modern era, this was considered as sick a burn as you could deliver.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Ouch, but the emergence of Trump and the corroding of the nation's political rhetoric make that statement sound like a love letter. So it's almost disorienting to hear two candidates simply debate. Did they do this out of respect for civility and norms? Probably not. Prominent pollster Elizabeth Jarose tells us it was smart politics.
It was a much more respectful debate than we've seen. Also, it was focused on the issues. So I know that when I talk to undecided voters tomorrow, for example, they're going to be happy about that.
So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the nasty and sometimes violent rhetoric is turning off middle Americans, leaving the extremes of both parties as the groups most engaged in the political process. And both candidates need to scratch and claw to get as much of that small sliver of the middle as they can. So instead of talk of being weird or knocking childless cat ladies, we got this instead.
I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that.
My party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options.
How about that? Humility. It's an underrated value in a politician, especially since our politics are dominated by people who think that admitting they're wrong sometimes amounts to weakness. I'm not naive enough to believe that Tuesday was little more than a brief departure from the new normal, and I'm aware of the fact that the candidates were less than truthful a lot of the time, and at the very end, J.D. Vance could not utter the words, "Donald Trump lost the 2020 election," because there was an audience of one that would disown him if he said that. I fully expect candidate Trump to continue the capitalized vitriol on social media and vice candidate Vance to frequent nutty podcasts spouting fringe conspiracy theories. But for one night, Americans got honest policy disagreements. They got sharp criticism without the attacks becoming personal. Let's remember what that feels like and sounds like, because a little Midwestern nice is needed to move on from this ugly epic in American political history. And that's our opening shot.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Tonight, a new chapter in the turmoil between the mayor and CPS as his school board members consider resigning. Worries about a broader war in the Middle East reverberate back here in Chicago. Paris on Politics is next.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Welcome to Paris on Politics, where we go behind the headlines and beyond the spin. So the discord between the mayor's office and CPS hits a new note this week. Rumors and reports that several members of the mayor's handpicked school board might resign. This after they declined to fire CPS CEO Pedro Martinez.
Reports that you all are hearing, I guess that's the nature of Chicago, where there are a lot of rumors.
The Sun-Times and WBEZ report several school board members are expected to resign. Messages to school board president Jinan Shi have not been returned.
When we talk to, members of the Board of Education, what we've asked them to do is not cut our schools. One of the proposals that was out there was 5,000 layoffs, firing teachers' assistants, which primarily are brown and black women. Who wants to fire brown and black women? Not me.
Sources tell Fox 32 that the mayor's office has had differences over CPS's refusal to fire Martinez and to take out a short-term, high-interest loan to help fund a new Chicago Teachers Union contract. The mayor denies he asked Martinez to leave.
This is not about a single individual. That's what you all are missing here. This is not about one person and one person's job. This is about the 300 and almost 30,000 families that require me to lead, to fight for them, and to invest in them.
Mass resignations mean the mayor would have to appoint interim members just months before a new 21-member hybrid elected and appointed school board takes over.
The timing is horrible. You saw the mayor's board vote 7-0 on a budget that was based on facts and not fantasy. You saw the board support the 5-year initiative 7-0 because of the fact that they know that the 5-year strategy that was put together is the right direction.
And earlier this week, CEO Pedro Martinez spoke to reporters for the first time since he says the mayor told him to resign and he refused. Take a look.
This is much bigger than me. This is about ensuring that our district has stability.
Martinez answered reporters' questions today after the Chicago Board of Education declined to take action on his employment last week. Today, Mayor Johnson denied he ever asked Martinez to resign or that he asked board members to resign for not firing Martinez. CTU President Stacey Davis Gates has been harshly critical, and several top CTU officials have called on Martinez to go. But he says he's still hopeful he'll reach an agreement and avert a teacher's strike.
I do believe there's a path forward. I do believe that we are going to continue to work with our union and to our staff to ensure that they're getting reasonable raises that we can balance our budget with.
Johnson and CTU have been at odds with Martinez since he and the school board refused their request to take out a costly short-term loan to pay for a new contract and balance the budget.
You've never heard a disagreement from me or from anybody about that we need more resources. And there's not even a disagreement on how to use the resources. The challenge is I'm trying to protect what we have today.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Local experts on the widening conflict between Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran.
Discover Chicago's hidden gems and untold tales.
If you look up, odds are you're seeing our work.
They have such an intense and fierce look when they swoop down and grab a fish.
3, 2, 1, go!
Fox 32's photographers share the stories they've captured with you.
Fountain jet shoots up about 150 feet. Our designers, the sky is their canvas.
See Chicago through their unique lens. Streaming now at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Download Fox Local on these streaming platforms and start watching.
The viewer in the morning really needs to have a good feeling for what it's going to be like for the rest of the day.
I've got 3 kids myself, so I set out their clothes Monday through Friday, which you can do too based on our 7-day forecast. The last thing that you want to have to think about is what is my kid going to be wearing to school? What do I need in the morning?
Having grown up here, having spent about 30 years in this market predicting the weather, you not only get really familiar with the weather, but with the needs of your audience. And that's what it means to be the weather authority.
The Middle East is on edge, and the reverberations are being felt all the way back here in Chicago. With the nation's largest Palestinian population and sizable Jewish and Muslim populations, many Chicagoans are anxious about the safety of family members in Israel, Lebanon, and Palestine. As Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor reports, the Middle East is on the brink of a wider war as Israel's war cabinet prepares to respond to Iran's aggressive missile attack launched on Tuesday.
Loud blasts in central Beirut on Wednesday as Israel targets Lebanon's capital city. The strike hit a large apartment building that houses Hezbollah-affiliated first responders. At least 9 were killed. Israel is focused on taking out Hezbollah strongholds, but their ongoing strikes in Lebanon have killed more than 1,000 and injured dozens. Hospitals are overwhelmed.
There's no place safe in Lebanon now.
Israel's military has now issued evacuation orders for over 20 villages in southern Lebanon, signaling a larger ground attack is imminent. And Israel's war cabinet also has its sights set to the east after Iran launched its largest attack ever on the Jewish state Tuesday.
Those who attack us will face serious consequences. For every missile fired, we will respond with strength.
Stateside lawmakers are debating how Israel should respond and whether it should target Iran's nuclear facilities.
Support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. They have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
It makes zero sense to me why Biden would take Iran's nuclear facilities off the table publicly. Why is it so hard to say all options are on the table and we stand with our ally Israel to support itself?
It's been nearly a year since Israel went to war following the October 7th attack by Hamas. With that anniversary coming up, the FBI says its agency is fully engaged to prevent any attacks on U.S. soil. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox 32 Chicago.
And joining us now to shed more light on the conflict in the Middle East, whether it could lead to an all-out regional war, and what the United States' involvement is, are Robert Pape, head of the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats, Thomas Mockaitis, professor of history and refugee and forced migration studies at DePaul University, and Matteo Farzane, chair of the history department at Northeastern Illinois University and author of Iranian Woman and Gender in the Iran-Iraq War. 3 excellent experts locally to dissect what is going on right now. First, Professor Mockaitis, how do you think this Iranian missile attack into Israel will escalate the wider conflict here?
First of all, it was a bit more sophisticated than the attack in April, and some of the missiles did hit their target. Israel's being very tight-lipped about the degree of damage, but they admitted that even some of the bases were hit. And in April, the Biden administration was able to get Netanyahu, as Biden said, to take the win, settle for a very limited strike as a demonstration, and then both sides agreed to climb down off the ladder. That is not very likely to happen in this case. There will be more extensive attacks on Iran, and I only see that as part of the downward spiral of escalating violence.
Professor Pape, you saw Republicans upset that President Biden didn't approve of the notion of targeting nuclear sites in Iran. Do you think that's where Israel's going to go here in response?
This is already an incredibly dangerous period. We have now a regional war. The question is how far it will escalate. If Israel in the next round goes after Iran's nuclear capabilities, this isn't just going after capabilities. Iran is only weeks and maybe even less away from functioning nuclear weapons. Now, they have not been tested. There is no test that's been visible. But we know from IAEA reports, the administration itself, that they are on the cusp. And there's no extra intelligence to know just how far they are or where the rest of material may be located. We know about famous sites. Our intel, both Israel and American, may know about some covert sites, but there's no way to be sure that you could get it all. And that's a real risk because you cross those red lines, this puts us in a whole new ball game of risk.
Certainly a powder keg right now. Professor Farzane, there's a lot made of the connections between the militant groups, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and their connection to the Iranian regime. Reports say that they basically act as proxies for Iran. Can you delve into that relationship a little more for us?
Sure. I mean, since the beginning of the success of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran, under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini, made it very clear that it wanted to be the representative and the hand that would help all countries, all Muslim nations that are under tyrannical rule. And Israel, of course, was deemed as the ultimate enemy of Palestinians, and hence they refer to it as the Zionist state. They won't even call it by its legal name, the State of Israel. So it was part of the foreign policy of the Islamic Republic up until now to create a situation by which they would push their borders to the Israeli border rather than having it close on the Iran-Iraq border when the war actually happened. That gave them more enticement, so to speak, to kind of push those borders very close to Syria and Israel, Lebanon and Israel. And since they didn't have any control over Jordan, what happens in the Kingdom of Jordan, they kind of went along and by massive payments and help to not only Fatah at one point, but then Hamas and then Hezbollah, they created a situation by which they could use them as proxies, and that's been the status quo ever since then.
And so the larger conflict here is Iran and Israel. And Professor Moukaitis, we know that Israel launched an incursion into Lebanon that reportedly killed the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, but it also hit civilians. How does this escalate the broader conflict?
It certainly will. And I think most Americans fail to understand that just because we call Hezbollah a terrorist organization doesn't mean that's all it is. It is intimately interwoven with the state and society in Lebanon. And it was not just their leaders that had some of those pagers. There were healthcare workers and others. And the anger is incredible. And the real danger is that Lebanon could implode. It was already a very fragile state with about 5 million people and 1 million refugees from the Syrian civil war. And this is not the first rodeo. Look what happened in '82. They removed the PLO and they got Hezbollah. They went in 2006. It still didn't do it. That's what will happen here. They can degrade Hezbollah, but they're not ever going to eliminate it without a lasting peace settlement.
And Professor Pape, this incursion in Lebanon that reportedly killed Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, does that significantly weaken Hezbollah and the opposition to Israel?
There's no doubt in the last few days with the pager attack and knocking off the top leader, there's short-term disruption. But it's important to remember that Israel went into Lebanon over 40 years ago, 1982, to go after one terrorist group, the PLO. Hezbollah didn't even exist. Hezbollah came up as a reaction to that. And now, 40 years later, Hezbollah has become one of the most powerful, and Tom's explaining just how powerful, terrorist/military organizations here in the Middle East. And so, yes, there's always a little bit of temporary disruption, but the fact of the matter is you may actually get a much more vicious leader, because in the leadership battles here, you got to show you're tough. And how do you do that? You kill.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
We know we're politically divided. Well, now those political divisions are starting to map onto some of the foreign policy issues.
October baseball is different. It's history making it, breaking it, rewriting it. It's ice in your veins, tested by 60 feet of heat. It's a faithful silence and a definite roar. It's putting your money to work, giving your city what they've earned, and the wild card, playing for keeps. Yeah, October's different. Chicago Sports Insiders.
I am so excited. This is gold right now. It's gold.
Streaming now on your smart TV at Fox 32 on Fox Local, your home of the Bears team.
Every Bears game will be must-see TV.
Following every step of a historic season.
Hardcore on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Download Fox Local and get in the game now.
Touchdown, Bears!
Search Fox Local on these streaming platforms and start watching today.
All right, well, let's take a look at how this is playing into United States politics. As we know, there's a presidential election in a month, and the vice presidential candidates debated on Tuesday. Here is what they had to say about this conflict at their debate.
It was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration.
All right, Professor Farzaneh, what the candidate Walz is saying there is that under Trump, the U.S. withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal that they had. J.D. Vance is blaming the Biden administration for the potential for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Where's the truth here? Is there an objective middle ground?
Well, one thing that we don't do as historians is to do counterfactuals, but sometimes I guess it's good to kind of think about what would have happened if the Trump administration hadn't gotten out of the nuclear agreement, because that hurt not only the American interests, I believe, in the Middle East and in Iran, but it also hurt the interests of the people inside Iran because they got really disillusioned and disenchanted by all of this coming and goings that it involved with the Foreign Minister Zarif and the involvement of the Supreme Leader Khamenei to get this agreement signed. And from the get-go, the conservatives, the people that are staunch enemies of the United States, that had warned that you cannot trust the United States for its word. And since administrations changed and this was not put through the Congress to become law, there was a chance that it would be taken out, and that actually became the truth that everybody experienced, like we talk about right now. So in some ways, what we have to take from what the candidate Walz was saying is absolutely right. And what Vance is actually saying, the $100 billion is not a payment for agreeing for this, but it's a payment, it's money that actually was owed to Iran. So they basically had unfrozen the money and given the money back. A lot of people out in public think that the United States paid Iran some kind of bribe, so to speak, to sign on the agreement, but that was not the case. That was the money that was actually owed to Iran.
All right, Professor Makaitis, the United States has spent billions on weapons for Israel, all the while calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire. Do you believe, whatever party takes over power, that this nearly unconditional support for Israel is going to continue in the United States?
No, I think that's one of the big questions. I think Netanyahu is being so aggressive in part because he sees a window of opportunity that could close on November 5th if Vice President Harris is elected. I don't expect her to pull the plug on the support, but I expect that there will be a greater opportunity to ratchet up the pressure. If Donald Trump is elected, that window is going to remain open indefinitely, because we saw he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized control of the Golan Heights. I think this is not a particularly good thing. I would also add very quickly that I don't think that in the long run, this is good for the state of Israel either. They did a survey there in which 54% of 18 to 34-year-olds said they would leave the country if they got the chance. They'd emigrate. This is a soul-numbing kind of conflict to be living in this constant state of perpetual war, which is what, with intermittent ceasefires, which is what you've had over the last 30 or 40 years. So I think something has to change, and I think it may very well, depending on the outcome of November 5th.
You know, and all three of you are college professors, experts on this region, but also witnessing this play out on your college campuses. And there's just such a divide here in Chicago in the United States. There are voices that believe that Israel is to blame for the devastation in Gaza and Lebanon. There are other voices that believe, well, it's Hamas who launched the attack nearly a year ago to the day, and Israel has a right to defend itself. Professor Pape, on this, is there an objective middle ground here, or is one side winning out over the other?
So Paris, we did at the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats a mega study of 5,000 current college students and 5,000 current Americans in the wake of October 7th. And one of the big findings in our study, which they can go, your listeners, to the CPOS website at the University of Chicago and find our Campus Fears report, is that the divisions you're describing match the political polarization of our country. You see, nearly all of the pro-Palestinian supporters are Democrats. That's not all, but 75% are. And it is more divided on the pro-Israel side. So I want to say that it's all Republicans. However, if you go and see, we know we're politically divided. Well, now those political divisions are starting to map onto some of the foreign policy issues. And so you're getting spiral effects, a lot of intensity. And that's one of the big reasons why things were so explosive after October 7, when, think back 20 years, we invade Iraq and there's not a single protest on our college campuses at the University of Chicago and basically nowhere else. We have had now political alignment with a lot of our foreign policy issues. And this creates a lot of explosiveness in our country.
And Professor Farzaneh, speaking of explosiveness, do you believe this is going to escalate into a regional war between Iran and Israel? And will the United States be drawn into this at some point?
I certainly hope that that would not be the case. I think the cooler heads would prevail on the side of the Iranians. I think I give them more credit than they actually get. However, something that Bob and Tom mentioned with the elections around the corner, and with the idea, Netanyahu thinking that whatever he has a time window, whatever he wants to do, he has to do it till the election, because if the Democrats win, chances are the pressure is going to be tremendous on him to cool it off, and maybe some changes will take place inside the state of Israel. But at the same time, if Trump wins, then it's going to be really bad news for everybody. Whether or not Israel will attack Iran, we have to kind of think about what kind of level we're talking about here. Is it going to be a limited sort of aerial invasion by bombing nuclear sites? I just heard in, some news from, I think, BBC Persian, that they were talking about the possibility of wanting to hit energy installations and water installations, which is the infrastructure. Well, that's not going to win a lot of hearts and minds inside Iran, if that's what Netanyahu was thinking. Also, he had released a message, a few-minute message to the Iranians, kind of being I called it the George W. Bush of the Iraqi freedom operation, that we're going to come, we know how upset you are, we're going to get rid of for you, we're going to help you to get rid of the Islamic Republic and the tyrant regime and so on and so forth, which I think is wishful thinking. But unfortunately, there is a population that is very loud, but I think it's small. But they could be very effective if they're loud and they're small and they're motivated and moving along inside Iran, that kind of hopes that Israel would do something like that, so they would get a chance to maybe overthrow the regime. Now, if that were to happen, that means Israel has to effectively do something similar that they did to Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, find where the supreme leader is, find the leadership, the presidency and the cabinet, and it's going to be a lot more complicated than what happens in Beirut. And I definitely hope that that doesn't come to fruition.
And it's so much at stake here in this election, not only domestically, but as you just mentioned, with what's going on in the Middle East. So much to get to, and we appreciate your insights, Professor Robert Pape, Thomas Makaitis, and Matteo Farzaneh. Thanks for joining us. And that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Please stay up to date on all the news you need to know on Fox 32 Chicago. So long, everybody.